So, this is Wednesday, and the theme today, or what we're going to talk about today, is something that is rather unusual, and we haven't talked about it during the period that Harry and I have been doing these webinars before, and the topic is suicide and the three principles. And suicide is not an everyday item and not an everyday theme. So I've been looking a little bit forward to it, and I've been looking very much forward to hearing about it also in the light of the experiences of Harry. I would like to start out with saying that I think that suicide is probably one of the biggest mistakes that we encounter as human beings, because it is a mistake if you would view it from the point that killing the body is going to be the solution to eliminating a thought. So it's really putting the physical thing in front of the thinking in order to eliminate the thinking. And what is my hope is really that through the acquaintance with the principles, that we will be able to enlighten people about the connection between their experiences and their thinking. And I think personally that is going to help a lot, and really will help diminish these tragic sort of solution to a problem that really seems overwhelming, but only is overwhelming because one is so buried into the problematic. So Harry, would you kindly take off and give us your thoughts about it? And then I think what we may do is probably I love the dialogue that we normally have during these webinars. And I think that the more that we can discuss it and the more we have the different angles of it, the more it will be worth listening to afterwards by the visitors to our recordings. But Harry, please take it away and give me your input on the matter.
Okay. One of the interesting things today is I'm actually giving two talks. This one that we're participating in this talk, but this topic is 3P principles and suicide. And then in 6 hours, I'm going to be talking as the main speaker in Colombia, and the topic is Life is a Perfect Design. It's almost ironical that if life is a perfect design, how come we have suicide in it? And so we're at two ends of the spectrum, and the talk will probably have a certain similarities, different tones and so on, but there'll be a similar theme. And one of the things with suicide, I just to how we chose the topic, and so in Canada, there's a phenomenon. It's called, in the native indigenous communities, suicide goes right through a whole community with the kids. So what happens is it's like a virus. It goes right through, and then a community has 10, 15 suicides within it. So you could see that within that culture, and with those psychological problems or pressures that they're feeling, that they feel this is a phenomenon that will happen. Now, the reason we chose the topic was Dr. Keith Blevins and I entered a native community, and while we're driving there, I had a flat tire, and he got picked up and went and visited a client, a native lady whose son had just committed suicide. And he had shot a bullet. There was a bullet in the ceiling. And so she was at there's two sides to suicide. The first, of course, is the person who is experiencing all this pain and suffering. And the second is the people who are left behind. And she's the mother. And while she was in that deep state of despair, Keith arrived, Dr. Keith Blevins, and she had a huge spiritual insight. And her insight was something like a thought creates feeling. Not a thought creates a feeling, but the principal thought, the spiritual form that it is, creates feeling. And she's experienced that, and the rest of her life, her whole life, was totally changed. And after Keith left, I actually continued to work with the lady, mentor her, and we became very good friends and colleagues. But the experience, because of that story, is the reason the topic was picked, because a member of this community wanted to hear about this particular topic. Now, so that was first thing interesting. Yes, death happened in a very harsh way, but the result for her was it changed her whole life, and she became a very, very happy person. She's moved on now. The second thing about death that I wanted to relate to you was that Sid Banks had to experience not a suicide, but the death of his wife like that. He was in Miami visiting the Chipmans, and he left to go shopping, and he came back, and his wife had a plate here, and somehow it disconnected. And when he arrived back at the Chipman's house, that's Chip and Jan, he saw his wife like this, and he knew instantly she was gone. Now, Sid Banks, as we know, is a very, very pure and enlightened soul, but nothing affected him more. Nothing hit him harder than the death of his wife. It just devastated him. It took him a fairly long time to get over it. And interesting, this was the last time that he came back to Vancouver and hung out with all his old Salt Spring friends. He wanted that. He didn't want to hang out with the psychologist. He wanted he needed that love from that original feeling. And we all hung out together and watched Sid suffer through whatever it was that he was going through. And then finally, he decided he would start talking again. And on his first talk, you could feel his voice was very frail, weak. But he was coming out. And of course, it wasn't that much longer, 6 months later or so, that he met his second wife, Judy, in a supermarket, and they became husband and wife. Now, I tell those two stories because, to me, suicide has one ingredient that many other mental illnesses or problems don't have. Death is the best teacher in the world. You cannot pretend around death. Anything else, you can make up a thing and say it will work out and so on, but death is final. So death is the most major teacher in the world. And when people die, it's a spiritual event. Even though the psychological problems were prevalent, people move on because it's an event. And when they move on, they're going to someplace really, really beautiful, back into the oneness of life. But the people left behind, they're suffering like crazy. Their thinking and they have to deal with this finality of the situation. And I know that's true because here's a third story. There's a boy, he was about 12 years old, and he had cancer and, no hair, and he was dying. And everybody around him was suffering like crazy, but he was in a state of peace because he was ready to move on. So somewhere along that story, people are moving on because they're ready to move on and deal with situations. It's true that if they got an understanding, a positive feeling, and they would not do this to themselves. But the consequence is that on the material plane, it's just a cosmic illusion anyway. I know that's a harsh way to say it. It just is the way life unfolds. I have news for you. Christian's going to die too, one day, and that's inevitable. And so you have these experiences that life brings, but the people left behind have a tough time. Now, why do people commit suicide? Well, to be honest, why are they addicted to heroin? Why do they have mental illness problems? The answer kind of relayed to me with what Christian said about addiction. His story was people believe in a victim story. Remember that, Christian?
No, I do that.
Could you repeat that, what you said about that?
What I said was that I think the greatest benefits with the three principles is really that it removes the victim story out of the addiction equation. And what happens is as soon as the addiction is seen in another light, it sort of dissolves by itself. But you cannot have an addiction without a victim story. And this is very important because otherwise the addiction is a crutch function, and the crutch function is really related to the victim story.
Go ahead.
So the liberty with the three principles is really that whereas the addiction is a surrogate to the three principles in the sense that the addiction is trying to establish the nice feeling you have when you get into the three principles. But the thing is that the nice feeling that comes with the addiction is very short-lived. So you have to go back again to the addiction in order to experience that nice feeling. But I think that one of the reasons why the three principles work so beautifully against addiction is that it provides the nice feeling on a permanent basis. And as soon as you realize that, the need for addiction falls away. So what I was thinking was really when it was really an eye opener when I saw that the victim story was the predominant factor of any addiction story. So when I saw that the victim story out of the equation, there would be no more addiction.
So let's look at that. What Christian just said. First thing is, if you're looking at the feeling, let's call it the suicide feeling, it's big. It's all encompassing. It dominates. It obviously controls you. We've all felt despair. There's nobody in this room who has not felt despair, where it has surrounded us, totally taken. What the three principles do is they bring an understanding. There's no space around that feeling. It's just all encompassing. What the three principles bring it down to is a thought creates feeling. At the thought level, there's space around it. You actually have room to maneuver. But in the expansion of the feeling, there's no room. It's all engulfing. And we've all felt this total feeling of despair or hopelessness or confusion or heaviness. But then when you bring it down to a thought and change the thought, which is all the three principles talk about in psychology. The psychological nature of the three principles is change thought, and your reality changes. So from that context, you have an answer within yourself. And of course, here's the joke. You have to look there first if you're going to find the answer. You're not going to find it anywhere else, I'll tell you that. I haven't, nobody else has. You have to look inside. And when you look inside and see the simple paradigm that thought creates feeling, if you're lucky, it's free. You're free at that second. So that's the psychological ramifications of that scenario. The other side of it is, if you're in a loving, if you are more, let's say, a spiritual person, and that feeling happens, you don't think about it so much. You let it play out, knowing that it's a spiritual reality, that everything is perfectly designed, everything is perfect in its context. And from that point, it will just, your mind is more like a river. You're not trying to think of what's wrong. You acknowledge that it's raining out, and you put out an umbrella. You let the river flow through. And from that context, all of a sudden, it only lasts a very short period of time, and you move on to the feeling. And even better, this is the good part. There's a pot of gold there because there's something I don't understand. And if I don't understand something, I want to know that I don't understand. So it's waving a flag and saying, hey, dummy, you don't understand. And I go, And then I let the river flow through. And right at the end of it is these insights, these pots of gold. And each one of them lets me see a little bit deeper who I am. And here's the joke. This is very important. I want you guys to really understand this. If it's negative, it's not negative. That's just your interpretation of it. It's not negative. It's just happening. And as the level of consciousness goes up, these negative feelings are seen more from neutrality. Basically, the victim story is about you're not neutral, you're taking it personally, and you're identifying it within your own thinking processes. In neutrality, these negative feelings are gifts. In personal interpretation, these negative feelings are pain in the asses. Oh, excuse the expression. Negative. Different. That's important because when you are helping someone, example, we have some mothers here, and your kids come to you with problems, and you're sitting in a neutral place, not seeing it as a problem, but in how it can unfold in a beautiful, positive way. The result is beauty and positivity. But if you get caught up in interpreting as it's negative, what happens is that negative reality takes form. And so when you're counseling people, which different people here do from time to time, you're going to walk into negative feelings. I work with the heavily addicted. They have heavy feelings, guys. No excuse. I mean, it's not just one big positive yummy out there. And I don't mind, because it's just the doorway, a portal to them opening up and teaching me that it's not negative. It's human. It's just we are. human. I don't know about you, but I like being a human being. But, I have, certain things that, if somebody punches me in the nose, I notice my nose bleeds. But maybe by them punching me in the nose, they've helped me to see I hurt their feelings or something like that. There's always an easy way to live in a gentle way in our life. But Sydney Banks was not just, everything is perfect, nothing affects me. Oh no, he was a very passionate, alive human being. And sometimes he'd get really angry. He got angry when people were stupid. And a lot of times we have beliefs, these beliefs. So basically suicide is someone buys into their beliefs, and their beliefs are a bunch of thoughts. But more than that, the feeling comes in and they just feel they have nowhere to turn. And of course, that's the point where people go to drugs. Nothing in life makes any sense. And I got news for you. When I look on the news, it doesn't make much sense to me. I don't know about you. I mean, I have a good attitude to life, but I look around to this world, it just doesn't make much sense. The bankers don't know what they're talking about. The doctors don't know what they're talking about. The psychiatrists don't know what they're talking about. I don't know about you, but Donald Trump sure don't know what he's talking about. On and on. We're doing a trade negotiation with him now, and he's throwing all this nonsense stuff out. He's creating fear everywhere he goes. That's the world. So a person who is committing suicide or on the verge of suicide is on a heightened awareness of the stupidity of the world, and their world is feeling that way. But that's the beauty of the three principles. Sid only had one message: go inside. That's it. He didn't have any other message. I know he created the three principles, but his message was go inside. And when you go inside, find a good feeling. And when you find a good feeling, all the rest of it doesn't matter. I can't tell you how to go inside, but I can tell you that you're not going to find it outside. And Sid Banks did not talk much about the psychological world. He talked about the spiritual world. I don't mean religion here. He talked about spiritual reality, love and understanding. He talked about that the answer was in the formlessness, not in the form. Suicide is just the person who believes in the form. Well, we're all part of that club. So we have this journey, and then we have to experience things. When this lady's son committed suicide, it opened her up. It's a harsh thing to say, but spiritually, she would not have such an incredible life if her son didn't commit suicide. It's a terrible thing to say it like that, but it's true. So
Harry, I think that we have to, if we have been talking a little bit about victim stories and we're talking about suicide, I think it's very important that you cannot have a victim story and you will not be in a position where you want to commit suicide unless you perceive the world coming outside in. And I think that's a very important point to make at this stage here, because the realization that the world is created from the inside out really also is a part of the elimination of the victim story, and also of the real foundation for the reason for suicide. So I think that when we're talking about the three principles, I think that one of the three principles' major contributions is really the realization that the reality is creating from the inside out. And as soon as people will realize that, the option or the possibility of committing suicide really falls away, but because all it takes is another thought and you will be out of the misery. And I think that's a very important point also to make at this stage here, that every time that you feel every time that you feel victimized or you feel that something is wrong, etc., try to see whether it's not your perception of your experiences that is really creating the problem, that you perceive the world coming from the outside in instead of from the inside out. There's another thing which I thought about when we were talking about this suicide business, and that is that depression and frustration, etc., can also be interpreted as a call from the soul, bringing on, I need some attention, there's a wrong focus, etc. So from the inside out, there is a sort of silent revolution. The soul is saying, well, really, you are not having the quality of life that you really intend or that you really deserve. And consequently, there's a recognition of the truth in that, and because of what may have been, there is a realization of the shortage between, or the difference between what is and what could have been, which, to my way of thinking, really is also an explanation of the depression. So there is a very spiritual dimension of both depression and the frustration that lies behind the decision to commit suicide. That I really is mostly overheard because the pain is so great. Do you have any comments on that?
Me?
Yeah.
Anybody else? Let's.
Yeah. Anybody else? We'd love to hear from you.
What do you think about this very interesting subject? I know you're muted, but just say something about it.
Can you relate to the problems created from a worldview of the world coming from the world experience coming from the outside in? I mean, can you relate to the victim story and the direction of the experience coming from the outside in, as opposed to the experience created from the inside out? Does it make sense, or is it hocus pocus? Anybody? Trina, I'm with you. Yeah. Oh. Yeah.
Years back, I wrote my thesis called Suicidal Ideation and the Wholeness of the Self.
Yeah.
Basically saying that when you are in a state of suicidal ideation, what you're really searching for is not death itself, but to feel whole. And at that moment, you think that death will get you to whole because you become part of God, not realizing that you're already part of God. You're already whole.
Great point.
So
that's beautiful.
Yeah, it's more than beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Trina, I'll mute you.
Jeg har prøvet at begå selvmord flere gange i mit liv. Det er så ikke rigtig lykkes, og det er jeg så rimelig taknemmelig for i dag. Det? Og for nogle år siden, der gik jeg til noget terapi, og det blev simpelthen for meget for mig. Det blev simpelthen for ondt, så jeg havde mine 3 børn, så jeg gjorde det ikke, men jeg sagde til min psykolog på et tidspunkt, så siger jeg, hold kæft mand, jeg har bare lyst til at få fucking fred. Altså, jeg gider ikke mere nu. Så siger han til mig, men Trine, du får ikke fred, når du er død. Du er nødt til at være levende for at opleve freden. Og det har jeg ikke tænkt over mange gange, og det var egentlig rigtig fint. Det var ikke fordi, jeg ville gøre det, men jeg havde bare, giv mig nu bare fred. Altså.
Harry Trina is saying that she has tried to commit suicide a couple of times, and her psychologist, because she was seeking peace, and the psychologist told her, you have to be alive in order to experience peace. So, which actually was a very, very adequate remark.
Very adequate answer.
Yeah. Anybody else? Ja, Lotte?
Jeg har oplevet lidt det samme. Jeg har ikke prøvet på at begå selvmord, men jeg har talt meget om det. Og så var jeg heldig en dag, jeg var ved en psykolog, hvor jeg så var meget ked af det og sagde det til ham. Og så så gik han bare med mig helt ud, fordi jeg havde planlagt det hele. Så sagde han, jamen hvad så når du gør det? Hvad så når du gør det? Hvad er det så, du får? Ro, sagde jeg så. Okay, sagde han så. Kunne vi prøve at finde den ro et andet sted? Og så hjalp han mig simpelthen med, sådan, så vi fik fundet ud af, at jeg kunne egentlig godt sidde på det bjerg, uden at hoppe ud derfra, men bare mærke roen der.
Ja.
Og nu tænker jeg aldrig på at begå selvmord mere. Altså, det er bare så lidt, der samtidig skal til, at der lige er en, der tør at gå med ind i det.
Ja.
Og den ro, det var jo det, som du også hjalp mig med den anden dag. Altså, det var den samme ro, ikke? Altså, det vidste jeg bare ikke dengang.
Nej.
Men den anden dag, da vi to talte sammen, der hvor der blev så meget ro. Altså, nu ved jeg jo, at det er den ro, jeg ledte efter.
Ja.
Der var en anden måde at finde den på.
Ja. Harry Lotte is talking about she had considered the option, and the psychologist asked her, "What are you going to achieve by doing that?" I want some peace. Yes, and he told her, "Well, do you think that might be other ways of achieving the same kind of peace here without that drastic decision?" And that sort of solved the issue, and she was able to move on. So, but I think that it all boils down to the same thing. It doesn't matter whether we are talking about people trying to kill themselves or people doing different kinds of addiction, etc., etc. All the goals of all these kind of behaviors is achieving peace. And it doesn't matter what kind of action you're taking, it all boils down to, I want to be at a different place than the one I am at the present moment. And I think that's very important. And I think really, the more I think about it, the greater benefit the three principles are, because the three principles offer you the opportunity to achieving that peace that otherwise is sought through the different kinds of addiction. And I have found that I have been working with a couple of very heavy smokers here lately, and when they found out that the peace they achieved during the knowledge of the three principles and the quality of the peace they achieved, their addiction fell off totally by itself, because the addiction had no purpose anymore. And I think that's very important, because this is really the essence of the three principles, is that the three principles is really giving us the peace that we have been seeking through various other kinds of ways to obtain. And I the more I get into the three principles, the more beautiful and the more profound and the more fantastic it really seems to be. And I have just had another experience here with a girl studying, and she had some problems, and she wrote to me this morning, and I posted it on Facebook, and it was a beautiful experience she had. And it really strikes me every time I get to work with the three principles, the beauty and the ease and the calmness and the joy that the people experience that really are exposed to it. It's amazing. It really is amazing. And she said, "This is magic. It is magic." And in some kind of way, it is magic, because it is unexplainable. So I must say, every time I talk about this, I get more and more emotional, simply because of the depth of the implications of the three principles. Yeah. Anybody else want to contribute with something?
When Christian was talking, this person experienced a higher level of consciousness, and from that, peace came. So it's not actually that the three principles lead you to peace. you go inside, your level of consciousness rises, and from there, peace is produced, gratitude is produced.
I agree to that.
And so on. And that's the hope we have for ourselves, that no matter what we are mired in, the answer is always a higher level of consciousness. And from that level, things look different. And the three principles are invisible and there. So as our consciousness rises, rather than with our mind, which obviously is a bit of a problem, but with our feelings, we can feel elevated. And the moment we're elevated, we're connected once again to mind, universal mind. And that connection is not what we're aiming for, it is what we are. We already are connected to the universal aspects of life. And it's just freedom from my own crazy thinking. That's what I'm seeking, is I don't see this thing that's noisy, I call him Mr. Noisy. I don't see that as helpful in most cases. I actually see that as a computer, or really a machine. I call it a machine. Do you want to listen to the machine, or do you want to listen to the truth? I don't know. The truth sounds better than the machine. And when we jump a level of consciousness, like Christian was able to facilitate with this person, he actually just allowed them to open up to themselves. And they actually got a much more beautiful understanding of who they are. And what they saw was they are not their smoking. They do not need to smoke to feel good, but they are not their smoking. They are something much more magnificent. So in our life, we hear all these people suggesting how we should change, yet nobody tells us how we can change. And the answer is nobody can tell you how you should change, because you have to find that out for yourself. And as you become relaxed in your own skin, all of those things just naturally feel good. So it's funny to say this, but to me, suicide is unfortunate, but it just is.
Any comments to that? Ja. Kim, du må unmute dig selv.
Det gør jeg. Jeg tager den på dansk.
Ja.
Helt fra starten af vil jeg godt kommentere.
Ja.
Det der med at være offer, som kan føre enten til afhængigheder eller til i yderste tilfælde at gøre selvmord, er en naturlig følge. For det, hvis du tror på, at du er et offer, altså lever udefra ind i din virkelighed, som det du tror på, så vil en logisk resonering, hvis din livssituation er belastet nok, eller som her vil sige det, hvis vores bevidsthed var faldet tilstrækkeligt langt ned, vil det være et naturligt, logisk resonemang at få fred, som Trine Meyer sagde så smukt, men at det vil være det, man ville prøve på at søge. Det nærmeste, jeg er kommet det sådan en situation, det var da for 8-10 år siden, jeg gik ned med stress, hvor jeg virkelig nåede ned til, hvor jeg tænkte, nu kunne jeg godt tænke mig at få fred. Nu gider jeg sgu ærligt talt ikke mere. Det blev ikke udmøntet i tanker om selvmord, men samtidig havde jeg en følelse af, at den her tanke var ikke sand. Jeg må så sige, at jeg har arbejdet med min spirituelle udvikling lang tid, før jeg opdagede 3P, og jeg er utrolig glad for 3P, for det giver mig en måde at udtrykke tingene på en helt anden måde, end jeg kan gøre i et rent spirituelt øje med. Så de 3 principper, hvor vi også jagter følelsen af sandhed. Når vi egentlig har den her følelse at hvile i os selv, eller hvad vi nu vil kalde den, som jeg kalder det at hvile i mig selv, så er jeg altid lykkelig. Uanset hvad livet tilskikker mig. Så ud over de følelser, som maskinen, som Harry siger, støjer med, om alle de her ting her, som vi ikke bryder os om, så er der den her underliggende følelse af at være lykkelig, eller være connected med det højere, vi nu måtte være som mennesker. Eller the mind, som vi vil sige i 3P. Og jeg synes, at det er helt naturlig måde, at når vi får indsigter i vores liv, om at tanker er følelser, vi oplever, at vi så kan udvide det og begynde at se på de her ting her. Harry sagde noget om at skifte perspektiv, eller altså at forandre sig. Vi behøver ikke at forandre os. Vi skal bare skifte perspektiv. Og det er jo også det, som vi i de 3 principper siger. Hvis vi begynder at tage vores tanker og de følelser, som de skaber, mindre seriøst, accepterer, at de er der, og kræver tanken, følelsen, at der skal gøres noget, fordi situationen kræver det, så gør vi det selvfølgelig. For det er trods alt et spørgsmål om, at kroppen gerne vil overleve i nogle tilfælde. Andre gange, så har den en indbildning om, at det er en masse ting, vi skal gøre, kvad de tanker og følelser, vi oplever. Men reelt set behøver vi bare have fokus på det andet perspektiv, og fange den følelse, som vi snakker om her. De 3 principper. Det var det hele.
Yep. Super. Er der andre, der har nogle indlæg, som vi vil komme i fortsættelse af Kim? Jeg synes også, at en af de ting, som ligger så indgroet i det danske sprog, det er, at man skal få fred, eller man kan få fred. Altså, som i virkeligheden oversætter det faktum, at fred er en basal tilstand, som vi alle sammen render rundt med. Og jeg synes en anden ting, det der med, at jeg også altid, efter at jeg har kigget lidt mere på de her principper her, det der spørgsmål om at forandre sig, er at skulle gøre noget for at opnå en original tilstand. Altså i virkeligheden er det jo simpelthen at holde op med at gøre det, man gør, så sker forandring af sig selv. Eller rettere sagt, så får man det traditionelle reset, factory reset, som man skal have. Er der andre, der vil bidrage noget til det her? Er I okay med det her? Okay, Harry, Kim had a major input here, and I'm not going to translate it into
no problem.
Because, okay.
I just want to share a feeling I've had. As Kim was talking, a sad feeling came into me. Not from you, Kim, please, not at all. But my dear friend, Jannik Petersen, who was responsible for me being in Denmark 7 times, and I was definitely his best friend, and we were very, very close together. And his life transposed from being a superstar in school, where he was the leader of his group, to him actually being almost like an outcast at the end of his life. And he physically could hardly move. And was going over to Denmark, and we were going to travel together, and he was embarrassed with what he had become. And I could feel that. And I said, it doesn't matter, Yannick. We'll just have a good time. And the short story of it is, in the in-between, before I had everything arranged, he ended up, he lived in this co-op little house, a little build, and he got stuck in the bathroom, lodged. He was very physically feeble. He got stuck between the toilet and the wall and ended up dying. And when you were talking, Kim, all of a sudden, this feeling of how much love I felt for him, how much he meant to me in my life, and what he had shared with me came flooding in. And when he passed on in such a cruel way, because you can imagine how it was like a suicide, but it like torture, because he must have been there for a day or two, stuck before he moved on. I had felt that he wanted to move on. He was embarrassed to be who he had become before his best friend. And I felt that it was the best thing for him to move on. He was not anymore, he was not living a very good life here. But he always shared incredible love with me. And I guess the feeling I have when you were talking, Kim, was he's always going to be here in my heart. You know, I mean, no, he's always going to be, he's there. He's alive. The feeling of him is alive. And we knew each other when we were small. Just a sec, I want to show you something. Which one is me?
Probably the one with the pipe.
That's me. It's Yannick Peterson. The women loved him. He loved life. He was great sport, super intelligent, but his life had fallen apart. He never stopped loving me. He never stopped sharing with me. And even though his life was in many ways a tragedy, he was a superstar in my mind. He really made a difference to who I am. I wouldn't be here right now without him. The truth is.
And he put up with your pipe. I saw that. So something must have been great about it.
Yeah, the pipe is kind of a...
The corn on the cob pipe.
The corn cob pipe. And
yeah.
So we met in Paris, and he smoked all the time, so I thought I would try it. And so I went to Denmark and got a corn cob pipe, and I put tobacco in it, and I hated the tobacco, but I loved the pipe. So I kept the pipe, and Danes would keep walking up to me and says, "Do you have a light?" And I go, "I don't smoke." You can imagine how the Danes, the look that would be on their face. You know, well, that doesn't make sense. But that, so I guess whatever happens, remember the love, not the tragedy. I mean, he changed me. He helped me so much. And I'll be honest, how many great friends do you have in your life? Not that many. And he was a great, great friend. So thank you, Kim, for sharing that. I don't know why it came through you, but that really brought a feeling. And I want to emphasize a sad feeling that was very healthy for me to experience. Like it was love. I felt his love, but I felt the sadness inside myself. So I just wanted to share that, guys.
Okay. Anybody else want to share something? I'm not going to take your name by name, but if you want to share something, put it out, and we'll take it from there.
Is there a question that you have around this scenario? Because I know in Denmark, suicide is not so rare. I know that a surprising amount of people have problems in Denmark. Laughing.
No, honestly, Harry, it's not even funny, because there was an article here now that the depression rate is very high at the moment in Denmark.
I see that all over.
Yeah. And so depression is a big issue, and so is depression and obesity. We have more than 50% obesity in Denmark. So
wow.
Yeah. So there is really some psychological imbalances here in Denmark, and honestly, when you look at the Danes from the outside, we seem to be a very happy people. I really can't. How does that compute with a high number of depressions? There's something wrong somewhere underneath everything. So from that point of view, you guys, you have got a lot of things to do outside in the world, because there's a client around every corner here waiting for you to talk to. So I think really one of the things that really is required of all us that have been lucky enough to make acquaintance with the three principles is really bringing them out in order to raise the quality of life of our fellow human beings. I was just going to say another thing, and I think that for you guys that are still contemplating the network, this is a sales talk, I know that, and it's very inappropriate, I know that too. But anyhow,
but you're going to do it anyway.
Yeah, I'm going to do it anyway. Yes, we are having this network conference in 17 days, and I think that is a great way to exchange experiences and really get inspiration in order to get this thing out of the road. And really, it is needed. It is really much more than ever at the moment. And there is literally a client on every corner, literally.
But you will
never run out of work, you guys.
Yeah, but you start with yourself. You have to. The change has to be within before you can help anybody else.
Hell, look at these guys. It's already happened here. So get out in the world here.
Yeah. You bring something up, Christian, with the depression. On the outside, the Danes are very calm. But I've been to Denmark 7 times, and the thing I noticed is they're actually more frustrated now than they were 7 years ago. They get angry quicker. Anything that doesn't fit into the formula, the rules, they seem to drop their cookies very easily. They're exasperated when something is outside of what the structure is. And the 3 principles will really help you with that, because life is not a set of rules. Even though you have good rules, it's not just a set of, life is unpredictable. And people, it turns out, relationships are also unpredictable. And so we want to help the Danish people to understand that you have created a very, very sensible lifestyle and a very high quality of life. But if it doesn't fit into the form, the structure, that's good. That means change. That's why we have diversity with people. We know the Danes have trouble with the Kurds, example. That's healthy for Denmark, not unhealthy. The reason is they think different, as you've noticed. And it's important to embrace all of life, not just Danish mentality. I love Denmark, guys. It's beautiful. But I had to choose between living in Denmark when I was offered a job there and going to Canada when I'm in my 20s. And I chose Canada for one reason: less rules, more. I could do what I wanted to do. I could be a crazy Canadian guy rather than a sensible Danish guy. You know, I chose that was the major reason of moving on and not living in Denmark, because Jannik's mother had arranged a job for me and everything. They really wanted me to stay. And I loved Denmark. I learned so much from you guys. It was incredible. You're so much more together than Canada in many ways, but yet Canada you don't have a homogeneous society. We have everybody is different type of society. And so we have to embrace the goodness, but we cannot be mired by not expressing ourselves in ways we need to express ourselves. It's very important. And I feel the frustration in Denmark. I'm just speaking honestly here, that people are more frustrated than they're letting on. And it's keeping things hidden or diplomatic is not always the right way. Sometimes you just have to be yourself. And that's what I've learned in my life. Nobody is crazier than Harry Durbitsky. Nobody I've ever met in my whole life is crazy.
I'll agree to that.
Yeah, there you go. There's proof, But I had to accept who I am.
Yeah.
And be who I am. And you know what I found? I liked me. I just was, I like. It's good. I bring something to the party. That's, maybe it's not always the right thing to say. Maybe it's said in the inappropriate, but I bring myself.
Mm.
And I try, and to be honest, I don't pretend to have a good feeling. I have a good feeling. It's simple. I'm not pretending to be something. I just feel good. And it turns out when you work with the Indians, you can't help, if you're a white guy, to look like an asshole. It's impossible not to look like an asshole. But they always forgive me. You know why? Because I have a good heart. That's why they like me, not because I know the 3 principles and this and that. They like me because I have a good heart.
Okay.
And with that,
Yeah.
And if elected, I will not run. Yeah.
Okay. Is anybody else want to say something here on the final note of this evening? Okay, and you're all aware of the 23rd here, so I'm more or less through now here. Anybody else want to say something? Okay, should we?
Let me just say, on the 23rd, Dr. Linda Pettit is coming on. She is a powerful guest.
On the 21st.
Oh, excuse me, the 21st. And we hope you come and bring other people, because when we have these, I guess what you'd call famous guests, we would like to have them to have as big a crowd as possible, not only because what they share, but we show our gratitude to them by our attendance and so on. And
otherwise we'll have to bring our family.
That's right. After it's how many bad Canadian jokes can you hear in one show?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you guys, thank you very much for turning on. I hope you had a reasonable, decent hour here. As Harry said, we really, really hope we are going to see you again on the 21st. Have a nice evening, everybody.
Good to see everybody.